Welcome to the CERAWeek Podcast, where the world's energy leaders and innovators share insights on the future of energy, technology, and climate. I am Atul Arya, Chief Energy Strategist at S&P Global. In each episode, we dive into the critical issues and bold ideas shaping our energy future. So let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to CERAWeek Podcast. This is your host, Atul Arya. I am here this time to introduce to you a two-part special podcast about the theme for CERAWeek 2026. Some of you may already know and may have seen what the theme is. What we're going to do in these two parts is to really go around and discuss how we have come about the theme for CERAWeek 2026 and its significance. Many different aspects of the issues around geopolitics, technology, energy, climate, they're all encompassed in this theme. So in the first part, myself and Dan Yergin will be having a conversation with our host, Naki Mendoza, who is a member of the CERAWeek leadership team. And then the second part, Naki will have a conversation with Carlos Pascual and Roger Divan, all members of the CERAWeek Executive Committee, and we will all try to deconstruct the theme.
Dan, Atul, it's a pleasure to be speaking with you both today. Atul, thank you for letting us turn the table on you so we can leverage your expertise in a different capacity on this podcast. For the listeners, I'm Naki Mendoza, a director on the CERAWeek team. It's an exciting time of the energy calendar for us here at CERAWeek and at S&P Global, because we've recently announced the title of CERAWeek 2026. Words matter, titles matter. As conveners of the global energy conversation, how we frame CERAWeek, it speaks to the signals, the trends, the trajectories that we're hearing from across the industry about the state of energy. So Dan, without further ado, would you like to announce the main title of CERAWeek 2026?
It's Convergence and Competition, energy, technology, and geopolitics.
Excellent. Thank you. Excited to bring that to market. So Dan, let's dive right into it. The purpose of this podcast is to give the audience a backdrop into the formulation of our thinking and the creation around that title and how it reflects the broader state of energy. So your reflections, please.
Naki, since about September, people have been asking me, what's the theme going to be of CERAWeek 2026? And of course, we went through a whole series of different ones, but we've also been listening and saying what's happening in the world, what is noteworthy, what's different, what's going to distinguish the discussion. And we were really looking at how the agenda was shaping up and looking at how the world is shaping up. And that's what led us to Convergence and Competition.
Atul, your perspective on how this title came about.
Yeah, as we say, it was a bit of a messy process. And if people know CERAWeek, we are a conference of ideas, and the CERAWeek committee is full of ideas. But I think we landed on this because it's not all competition and it's not all convergence. We wanted to bring those two aspects together. And then, of course, the key issues in the world of energy and more broadly in the world today are around technology, geopolitics, the impact of artificial intelligence. So we feel that the title covers all of that. The other thing we need to be mindful is the title is still fresh and relevant in March and not just today.
I should say we've had very vigorous discussion about it. At the end of the day, you start with things that are more complicated, and then the point is to get it tighter and tighter and focus on what you think will be relevant and what people will want to know about and talk about in March of 2026.
So one of the reasons why it's great to have you both in this discussion is because you both have such a great pulse of the industry because of your travels, your engagement with investors and governments and industry practitioners and investors. What have you been hearing from them in your engagements around the world, and how does the title resonate with what you've been hearing from industry?
Let me start with just some of the pieces of it. One of the things that's been most striking to me is we've had the meeting of two different industries. Tech has met the energy industry, and they both have people who are described as engineers. But an engineer who does software is something that's, can be maybe a matter of months. An engineer in the energy industry is building something that might take 5 years. So it's really this clash of cultures, but it's also a convergence of these two industries. I've seen the tech industry trying to understand the energy industry trying to understand the tech industry, as AI has become so focused on electricity. One of the big hyperscalers, tech companies, said electricity is the constraint on AI. And so that's where that's come together. So that's one convergence. And then there's a convergence more specifically between natural gas in the tech industry, natural gas coming back into electric generation in a significant way. And so it is these coming together that define the convergence of global gas markets.
Yeah, I'll give you another dimension of convergence, which is the importance of energy in the global economy, energy for economic growth. The fact that people around the world, particularly in the developing parts of the world, want a high standard of living, just as most of us in the US and Europe have. For that, they need energy. And I've been around, I was in Africa, I've been in Asia this year, and that's been a big part of the conversation, this idea that energy is so critical. So convergence from that dimension, slightly different to what Dan is talking about from a technology dimension, has been very important. And I think we'll see that, in my view, in March, this whole issue of do we have enough energy, not just to meet the demands of AI, but overall energy for economic growth? Are we going to see constraints or shortages? And I think that's an energy security, which it has come back in a big way. It's not gone away.
I think one of the things you've been working on are those energy scenarios from a global south perspective.
Yeah, that's right. We are doing a project and hope to complete it in time for CERAWeek. And then we co-wrote along with Peter Orszag the paper around the troubled energy transition. How people visualize the transition back at the time of COVID has turned out to be very different. And I think that narrative has now become very strong. And I think we're going to see part of that narrative play out as part of this theme for the conference.
So you're both sketching out some very big picture narratives, a lot of multidimensional trends, and a lot of dramatic changes that have occurred in a fairly condensed time. Did you find it easier or harder to capture all of that in a singular title this year compared to previous years?
I think so. Last year, it was a different perspective. It was COVID was in the rearview mirror. It was moving ahead and regaining the footing of the energy industry. This year, I think greater clarity on that, greater clarity on demand challenges. But also there's the other side of the divide, which is competition.
Just to build on what Dan is saying, our title includes energy, technology, and geopolitics. And geopolitics has been a dominant element of the conversation. And I think we're going to see that again next year. The Russia-Ukraine conflict has not ended. There have been other conflicts around the world, and some of them have big impact on the energy markets and the world of energy.
Well, and I think that's where we get to the competition, geopolitical competition. It's the fracturing or the ending, at least, of 3.5 decades of what we might call easy globalization. As borders of one kind or another go up, as protectionism comes up, as trade barriers rise up, as the flow of people is much more impeded than it was a couple of years ago by various types of restrictions. We're certainly in an era of great power competition. Can you imagine that the Russian-Ukraine war is now going to be as long as World War I? It's going into its 4th year. And this is a war on the European continent. If anything, the tensions seem to be growing sharper rather than receding. So you have that kind of competition, and that's had a huge impact on the energy market. Russian gas is not going to be flowing to Europe anymore, but rather gas from the US and other countries in the form of LNG. We have a partitioned world oil market. So there's that aspect of competition. And then there's competition among the different energy resources, renewables competing in a different environment than they did even a year ago.
And this sort of takes us into the dissection and analysis of the second part of the title, Energy, Technology, and Geopolitics. And you're going there, Dan. Let's continue on with this. Transition, addition, abundance, dominance. What's your preferred phrasing for energy these days?
I think it is what we used, and Atul coined a term that's now become rather used by other people, that it's energy addition. You see that in the growth numbers, and you see it in the new studies from the International Energy Agency saying that you need $540 billion of investment a year in upstream oil and gas, which is not what they were saying 5 years ago. So there is that sense, and that Atul said, meeting energy needs, yes, the developed countries, the billion people, but the needs for economic growth of the developing people. We really heard that at our Energy Asia conference in Kuala Lumpur several months ago. I think that dialogue had a big impact on us.
In addition to the energy addition, there are other objectives which have not gone away, and some new ones have come about, like dominance. We are seeing some degree of transition, right? Particularly in China, which is pretty remarkable because they are growing everything, but also there is a lot of renewables being added in China because of its dominance, and also in other parts of the world. And what I'm really looking forward to in March is to see what is dominant then. Is it addition, transition, just some of each? And we've also said that transition is multi-speed. It's different in different parts of the world. I think that kind of foundation hasn't really gone away.
Yeah, and I think that what we have at CERAWeek gives us the opportunity to really see and hear and understand perspectives from around the world that are very different in terms of how people are looking at the world. Atul mentioned that, of course, the U.S. has dominance in terms of oil and gas. China has dominance in terms of what the president of China calls the new industrial supply chains. And that's a form of competition too. But it will be very important to see now, about 6 months after that, the Trump One Big Beautiful Bill, which has not eliminated, but constrained the incentives for renewable energy. But still, there are very important drivers there and imperatives. And of course, these have become more competitive on their own. I think by March, we'll have a much better sense of where things are going in renewable energy. One of the large European utilities told me that they're going to be announcing some major investments in renewable energy in the United States at CERAWeek.
Business models, it's a major theme at CERAWeek and how we frame a lot of our sessions. So in terms of the energy providers and the energy companies, what are you noticing about how they are retooling or optimizing through these multidimensional variables that we're talking about?
The large energy companies, they are in business for decades. They are like a super tanker. They don't turn things immediately if things change. Their big task is to make their business models and investments resilient to changes in policies. And there have been plenty of changes, as Dan has talked about. For the large oil and gas companies, they have pivoted back to oil and gas in a big way because, as Dan said, even the IEA is saying we will need more investment, decline rates are increasing, actually led by shale. So all of that has led the big oil and gas companies to say, okay, we need to continue to invest and even find new sources of oil. We are seeing massive development in LNG, many companies investing in LNG in the US, and some recalibration of how companies want to invest in clean energy technologies because all a function of returns, and they're trying to balance the returns of the entire portfolio. They also have to satisfy the needs of their shareholders. So we are seeing some retooling, but I wouldn't say it's a whole shift from one strategy to another. I haven't seen that in any major company.
There will be discussion, and we'll get insight into what's going to happen with U.S. shale. Is it plateauing, or will it plateau in the next year or two? Is exploration in upstream coming back to the fore? Are people looking for new Guianas around the world? So I think we'll get a good sense of that and how people's strategies are changing. Another area of convergence that I really think about, which occurs to me as we're talking, of course, is the convergence of minerals and metals with the energy sector. They're now part of the energy spectrum in the way that they were not. We will be rolling out our new copper study, Copper in the Age of AI, at CERAWeek. And I think that will emphasize, because if you want more electricity, you need more copper, and where that's going to come from, and what the challenges are there. And I guess another sign of convergence, what we're talking about before, is the development of this global market in LNG and the convergence of U.S. natural gas with the global markets. It will be the 10th anniversary of the first shipment of U.S. LNG from the United States, which actually at that time, I believe, went to Brazil. And when that happened, we had a live feed of that ship leaving its port. And now here we are 10 years later, and the US is the largest LNG supplier in the world. That's happened very fast, and it's been very crucial in terms of geopolitics.
On to the next phrasing after the colon, technology. So Atul, maybe for you, the trend lines that you're seeing in technology, how should we see them through the lens of our title?
Yeah, one thing is for certain that CERAWeek 2026, we will probably call it the AI CERAWeek, right? Because AI will be the dominant theme, AI for energy, energy for AI. And I think there are some interesting questions. And Naki, you have been directly involved in setting the power programs for CERAWeek. I'm very much looking forward to it. I tell people that I'm a petroleum engineer by training, but I was born in an electricity family. My father worked in the power sector, and I feel very good that electricity is back on. And
Your father built power plants in India.
he built power plants in India. They were all coal-fired power plants.
Yeah.
I think power is such an important part of our lives now. The AI revolution is really highlighting the significant importance of power, electricity, to really make AI usable. That's going to be big, I think.
Yeah, power, electricity will be pervasive throughout the whole conference in a way that it hasn't been before. And there's where, again, you have examples of convergence between upstream industry seeking to help meet the needs of electricity for power, but we'll have a very strong participation by leaders from the global power industry. And then, as you said, on the tech, the Innovation Agora, which is part of Atul's parish or bailiwick. Last March, we had 250 startups. So I don't know how many we'll have this year.
Definitely more. And actually, just to make sure our audience doesn't feel like only thing we will talk about is AI, Naki, we will be talking about all kind of technologies at CERAWeek. We will talk about things related to emissions, things related to clean tech, batteries, solar. We'll talk about optimization of infrastructure. We will talk about how we are going to use some of these new technology like drones. So we will cover the entire spectrum of technologies in the Innovation Agora. I mean, right now we are building the program. We already have over 100 sessions in the Agora. Actually, we have too many sessions, so we're trying to figure out how to manage the time and space available. What is interesting to me, and Dan, you've also written about this, how the industry and our energy industry in a way has continued to reinvent itself with new technologies. We were not talking about AI even 3 years, 4 years.
Right, no.
We were talking about hydrogen, and look where that is now. By the way, we will talk about hydrogen, not as a hydrogen hub, but we will touch hydrogen for sure.
One of the meta themes, the meta narratives that we're thinking through of how we're developing the program is the big question of how to meet surging power demand across all forms of supply, all forms of technology, and what are the downstream effects and flow-ons from that in terms of infrastructure build and policies and permitting. So we look forward to covering all of that at CERAWeek 2026.
Naki, one thing to add to that is the whole issue of affordability. I think that's going to become another big issue. And maybe it's a more US-centric phenomenon, but we are seeing it in other places in Europe.
Certainly, it's a huge question in Europe, looking at deindustrialization. I was just reading an article yesterday about, despite everything, how European manufacturers are building their new plants in China because the costs are so much better. So Europe really has an issue about competition and how to be competitive as a region. That will be another dimension of competition among regions.
Atul, do you want to say a quick word about the Look Forward edition from S&P Global Energy?
Yeah, we are publishing Look Forward Data Center Frontiers. This is a part of our Look Forward series at S&P Global Look Forward Council. And in this particular edition, we are talking about many different dimensions of data centers, just kind of the macro impact of investments in data centers to the total amount of investment going in, the sort of the credit issues, the power demand, what is happening, for example, on data centers in Saudi Arabia, quantum. So we're covering an entire spectrum of issues around data centers. And by the way, we will be publishing another Look Forward in time for CERAWeek like we did in 2025.
Right. So, Atul, let me ask you a crucial question for listeners. How do they download the data center Look Forward?
They go in and say, Look Forward Data Center S&P, and they will go to the website, and then they have access to all the articles. It's not like a single PDF. They can look at each article, and then they can download each article.
Can we get it into a single PDF?
We can do that. Audience, watch for that. There will be a single PDF coming your way. But in the meanwhile, you can go to the website.
So rounding out the topics on geopolitics, Dan, we're talking about major policy shifts, rivalries, and competition. Is this a new map that we're seeing?
Yes, we are. We're seeing the end of what was really about 9 decades going towards open trade and reduced trade barriers, 8 decades of alliance systems eroding. As I said before, 3.5 decades of easy globalization coming to an end. So we are in a different world of geopolitics where economic nationalism has come to the fore. And of course, there is conflict and the threat of conflict. It's a more challenging world. And the energy industry, like all other industries and all other aspects of the global economy, are not immune to these big tremors and challenges from geopolitics.
Atul, on the topic of global climate actions and pathways, is it convergence? Is it divergence? Is it something else?
I think it's divergence and fragmentation based on the COP meeting, which ended at the end of November in Brazil. It wasn't one of the most exciting or effective COP. There were a lot of issues. And of course, the US has exited. Other big countries, China and India, did not come to COP. So I think the climate discussion has become quite fragmented into different groups. I think what we're going to see by the time we get to March is what just happened. The COP just finished. So I think things will settle down and we will start to see how people respond and how people react to the COP. Overall, I would say there is more divergence than there was, say, even 2 or 3 years back.
We could say divergence rather than convergence.
I completely agree with you, Dan, at least for now.
So we've set the stage topically, we've analyzed the title and the key messages. Programmatically and just the experience of CERAWeek, what are you both most looking forward to? What is exciting you and what might be different about this CERAWeek coming up?
Well, for me, obviously, what's different is embodied in the title because it just shows you how much the world changes from one year to another and how trends unfold over 5 or 10 years. So that part is there. But for me, it's the excitement of the event. All the different perspectives are there. And I always regard CERAWeek as an incredible learning experience. You know, it sort of brings your perspective forward and helps you see what's coming down the road.
Yeah, and I would say, Naki, similar to Dan, I will be listening very carefully. We all have our own beliefs on different things, whether it's AI or energy transition. And I would like to validate some of those assumptions. CERAWeek is a good place to do that because we get such diverse perspective. And I think one thing I'm looking forward to, just because of the calendar in March, and our audience may or may not be aware that we had the conflict of Ramadan for the last 2 years, and that has gone away. So we expect a much larger contingent from the countries where they observe Ramadan. And also we are hoping for a larger contingent from Asia, particularly China, India, Japan. It's such an important part of the overall discussion. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
And I think the point that Atul makes is that CERAWeek enables you to test your assumptions, test your thinking in ways that would not otherwise necessarily happen. While there's a lot of talking at CERAWeek, one of the most important things to do at CERAWeek is to listen.
Well, this has been terrific, and I want to thank the audience for listening to this podcast. Thank you, Dan and Atul, for this wonderful tour de force around the energy world. The countdown to CERAWeek is on March 23 to 27, 2026 in Houston, Texas. Dan, Atul, are there any closing words that you want to round out this conversation with?
I would say look forward to seeing so many people in Houston, and we'll do a lot of listening and a lot of learning.
Book your tickets soon and find a hotel room now because they will all be gone by the time it comes to March. Thank you, Naki.
Thank you, Naki, and thank you, Atul.
Thank you for joining us on the CERAWeek podcast. To stay connected with the ideas driving change across energy and technology, subscribe, share, and rate this episode. It helps us get the word out. Let's continue having impactful conversations. I'm Atul Arya. Until the next time.
The CERAWeek Podcast with Atul Arya is brought to you by CERAWeek, the world's premier energy conference. Be part of the conversations moving the world of energy forward. March 23rd through 27th, 2026 in Houston. Discover more at CERAWeek.com.